Okay, so, when you think about ninjas, right, you think stealth skill, incredible weapons.
Oh, yeah, legendary stuff.
Right. But did you ever think about how they actually made those weapons?
Yeah, good point.
Well, today we are diving deep into a document called Secret Guide to Making Ninja Weapons .pbf, and let me tell you, it is packed with instructions and diagrams for making a whole ninja arsenal.
Really?
Yeah, so forget the movies and all the special effects, right? This
Mhm.
is like the real deal. This is how ninjas might have actually made their weapons from stuff they could just find around.
Wow, so we're talking DIY ninja gear.
Exactly, DIY ninja gear. Our mission, if you choose to accept it, is to uncover the secrets of these homemade tools, to figure out how practical they really were and, maybe how ingenious.
I'm in, ball. Let's do it.
Okay, so first up, let's talk shuriken. You know those iconic throwing stars?
Yeah.
Everyone knows those. So according to this guide, if you wanted to make a shuriken back in the day, you'd need some mild steel, about 116 to 18 of an inch thick.
Okay, so not some super special metal.
Right. It's just regular mild steel. I think that's a really important detail because it means that ninjas could have made these weapons from stuff that was easy to find.
Yeah, that makes sense. They had to be resourceful, right?
Exactly. Now, the guide also lists the tools you'd need.
Okay, let's hear it.
You'd need metal shears, a file layout die, or even just a felt tip marker would work, a scriber or awl, and then optionally a drill.
So basically, pretty basic metalworking tools, right?
Yeah, nothing too fancy. It's not like they had some high-tech workshop.
Right.
Okay, so the first step is to lay out your shuriken pattern on the steel.
Yeah.
So there's definitely an element of design here.
You have to be pretty precise with that pattern, right?
Yeah, and then you'd carefully cut out the shape using the metal shears.
Okay, and then what?
Then comes the shaping. So you'd file the edges that you just cut to make them smooth and to get the exact shape you want.
Oh, I see.
But the guide emphasizes that this filing process is also what makes the shuriken sharp.
Right, so it's not just about the looks.
No, these were meant to be deadly weapons. Now, there's also this interesting note about drilling finger holes.
Finger holes.
Hmm,
Why would you need those?
that's a good question. Maybe it was for a better grip when you're throwing them?
Yeah, that makes sense. Or maybe to make them a little lighter if you were carrying a bunch of them.
Yeah, those are all good possibilities. And the guide actually says that shuriken came in all different kinds of designs and sizes.
So there wasn't just one standard shuriken.
Nope. It seems like ninjas could customize their shuriken for different situations.
That's pretty cool.
It is. Okay, so we've talked about how to throw things at people. Now let's talk about how to get up close and personal.
Okay, what do you have in mind?
Knives.
Oh yeah, classic.
The guide doesn't go into detail about every single type of ninja knife, but it does give us some general principles for how they were made.
Okay, I'm listening.
So first things first, the guide says that you need good quality steel.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
If you're going to be using a knife for all sorts of stuff, it needs to be strong and hold an edge.
Exactly. So the basic process is you start by tracing a pattern onto the steel, just like we did with the shuriken.
So again, there's that element of design.
Right. And then you cut out the shape using a hacksaw.
A hacksaw. That seems pretty basic.
It is. And that's the point. Remember, ninjas had to be practical.
Right.
Once you've got the basic shape cut out, you need to start shaping and sharpening the blade.
Okay, so how do you do that?
The guide says to use files and sharpening stones.
I can imagine that would take some real skill.
Yeah, it would. And then, of course, a knife needs a handle.
Right. So how did they make handles?
The guide mentions two main methods. One is using scales.
Scales? What are those?
Scales are basically separate pieces of material that are attached to either side of the tang.
The tang? Okay.
The tang is the part of the blade that extends into the handle.
Oh, okay, I get it.
The other method is to simply wrap the handle with something like cord.
Ah, okay. So that would give you a good grip.
Exactly.
Huh.
Now, there's also a mention of heat treating and tempering.
I'm not familiar with that. What is
Ah.
that?
It's a process that makes the blade stronger and less likely to break.
Oh, wow. So that's pretty important.
Yeah, it is. And the guide does mention it, but it doesn't actually go into the details.
Huh. I wonder why.
Maybe it was just common knowledge back then, or maybe it was like a secret technique that wasn't supposed to be written down.
That's a cool thought.
Okay, moving on. Let's talk about something a little more unusual.
Lay it on me.
The Metsubushi.
The what?
The Metsubushi.
Okay, that sounds pretty intense.
It is. It's basically a blinding powder that ninjas used for tactical advantage.
So like a non-lethal way to disable an opponent.
Exactly. It would give you a chance to escape or to attack while they're disoriented.
Wow, that's pretty smart.
It is. And the way they made the container for this powder is surprisingly simple.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
They used a cardboard tube, like from a toilet paper roll or a paper towel roll.
Wow. So they really did use whatever they could
I
find.
know, right? So you take this cardboard tube and you cut it to about 4 to 6 inches long.
Okay.
Then you fold one end closed and tape it up.
Gotcha.
And on the other end, you make a nozzle by making some angled cuts and taping that up too.
A nozzle. Why a nozzle?
I think it was so that they could control where the powder went. So they wouldn't accidentally blind themselves.
Ah, that makes sense.
Now, here's the thing. The guide just says to fill the container with blinding powder.
But it doesn't say what that powder actually is.
Right, exactly.
So what was in it?
That is the million-dollar question. Maybe it was common knowledge back then, or maybe it was a closely guarded secret.
Who knows?
Okay, let's move on to something a little more personal.
Oh, what's that?
The kakude.
The what?
The kakude. It's basically a spiked ring.
A spiked ring. Sounds kind of dangerous to wear.
Yeah, it does. But it would be really effective in close combat.
So how do they make these rings?
They would start with a metal band. It could be a flexible strip of metal or even some heavy gauge wire.
Okay.
Then they would shape the band to fit their finger.
I see.
And then they would add the spikes.
Okay, so how did they attach the spikes?
They could either solder them on, or if they had a really good piece of metal, they could actually make the spikes as part of the ring itself.
Wow, so that would be some next level metalworking.
It would.
Yeah.
And the guide says that the spikes could be pointed for piercing, or they could have a chisel edge.
So they could be used for different purposes?
Right. Maybe for stabbing or for slashing.
Interesting.
Okay, from rings to claws.
Claws, you mean like Wolverine?
Kind of. The next weapon is called the Decode, or cat's claws.
Oh, okay, so I guess they were worn on the hands.
Yep, they were basically metal claws that ninjas would attach to their fingers.
Wow, so they could really scratch someone up with those.
Exactly. And they were surprisingly simple to make.
Oh, really? Tell me more.
So they would start with a strip of metal, about 1/116 of an inch thick, half an inch wide, and 4 to 5 inches long.
Okay,
Then they would bend one end of the strip into a loop to fit around their finger,
I gotcha.
and the other end they would shape into a claw point.
So like a little hook.
Exactly. And the guide even says that they could curve the point to make it look more like a real claw.
Oh, that's a nice touch.
Yeah, it is. And they wouldn't just wear one claw, they would wear multiple claws on one or both hands.
So they were basically turning their hands into weapons.
Exactly.
Okay, that's pretty terrifying.
It is. Okay, so let's move on to something that gives you a little more reach.
Okay, what do you have in mind?
The kusari fundo.
What?
The kusari fundo. It's basically a weighted chain.
Oh, okay, so like a medieval flail.
Kind of. So you have a length of chain, and then you attach weights to both ends.
I see. And what kind of chain did they use?
The guide says you could use all sorts of different chains. It really just depended on what you could find and what you needed it for.
Makes sense.
And the weights could be pretty much anything heavy and compact. So metal balls, nuts, or even just rocks would work.
So again, it's all about using what you have.
Yep. The important thing is to make sure that the weights are securely attached to the chain.
Right, because you wouldn't want them flying off when you're swinging it around.
No, definitely not. And the kusari fundo could be used for all sorts of things. You could use it to strike an opponent, but you could also use it to entangle their limbs or even their weapons.
Wow, so it's a pretty versatile weapon.
It is. Okay, now, for something really unique.
Okay, I'm ready.
The kyoketsu shuj.
The what?
The kyoketsu shuj. It's basically a hook knife attached to a rope.
A hook knife attached to a rope.
What? Yeah, it sounds weird, but it's actually a really cool weapon.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more.
So to make one of these, you'd start by making the hook knife.
Okay.
You'd need a handle, which could be made of wood, or you could just wrap the tang of the blade.
Right.
And then you'd attach a curved blade with a hook on the end.
Gotcha.
And then you attach a rope to the base of the handle.
And how long was the rope?
The guide says it should be between 10 and 20 feet long.
Wow, so you could really get some distance with that.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
you could use it for all sorts of things.
Like
You could use it to cut, obviously, but you could also use the rope to entangle an opponent, or to trip them up, or to pull them off balance.
wow, so it's kind of like a grappling hook too.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, pretty amazing.
It is. Okay, and last but not least, we have the bushuriken.
The bushuriken, is that like a shuriken but different?
Kinda. So, you know how shuriken are usually star-shaped?
Yeah.
Well, bushuriken are basically just straight spikes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The guide says they can be made from steel rods or even just heavy spikes.
I see.
And they're usually between 6 and 12 inches long.
Okay.
So to make one, you basically just sharpen one or both ends of the rod or spike,
Gotcha.
and then you can throw it.
Yeah, and I guess you could throw it in different ways.
Yeah, the guide says there are different grips and techniques for throwing them.
Interesting.
So there you have it. a whole arsenal of homemade ninja weapons.
Wow. That's pretty impressive.
It is, and it really shows you how resourceful and adaptable ninjas had to be.
Yeah, they couldn't just go to the store and buy their weapons. They had to make them themselves from whatever they can find.
Exactly, and they were really good at it.
Yeah. It makes you wonder what they could have done with modern materials and tools.
That is a really interesting thought, and it just goes to show you that necessity is the mother of invention.
Definitely.
So next time you're facing a challenge, remember the ninja. Be resourceful, be adaptable, and never give up.
Words to live by.
Absolutely.
This was an amazing deep dive.
Glad you liked it.
I did. I learned a lot.
Yeah.
And it really makes you think about the history of these weapons and the people who made them.
Right. These weren't just tools. They were a reflection of the ninja way of life.
Exactly. I think that's a really important takeaway.
I agree. Well, that's all the time we have for today, but I hope this has inspired you to be a little more resourceful in your own life.
Me too.
Until next time, stay sharp.
And stay stealthy.
You got it.
Bye.
See ya.